All respected dignitaries and participants, I feel privileged to welcome you all for the second day training program on basics principles of disaster management, jointly organized by NIDM and Satyabama Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. I am Dr. Nagamani, co-convener of the program. I am privileged to brief the sessions on first day program. The first technical session was given by Dr. Montu Bose, Assistant Professor, Department of Business and Sustainability, Terry School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi. His lecture is on concepts and basics of disaster, in which he explained the definition of disaster, types of disasters, basic concepts. Also, he briefed what all disaster took place in 2019, in which he insisted totally 479 disasters took place in 2019, out of which 308 disasters are natural disasters, rest are from different human-induced disasters. He pressed that maximum disaster is led to flood. Then he discussed and explained clearly about climate vulnerability indices and its crisis in future. The next session was given by Lieutenant Colonel D.C. Vashishta. He has given an overview of NIDM management aspects of disaster management, in which he gave details how to manage disasters, then how government respond any kind of in which he gave details of managed disasters, then how a government respond any kind of disasters, preparedness, mitigation, finances were briefed clearly. He also insisted that NIDM is the only government organization for capacity building for giving training on disasters. Then he clearly explained the salient features of DM Act national and district level. Also, he said the overall strategy of pre and post disaster phases, which was handled by NIDM. The third session was from Dr. Anup Kumar Mishra, SATMET Division, India Meteorological Department, IMD, New Delhi. His lecture is on climate change, where he discussed in detail about the global climate changes variability, observed impacts due to climate changes, then how to explore climate change by using weather station, climate models, remote sensing techniques, and integrations of observations. He also insisted what are the mitigations and adaptations to be taken in future. Thank you. Today we have two eminent speakers for today's session. And first, Brigadier Datta sir.
Brigadier Datta sir is on line only, madam.
Yes, sir.
This is Balaji from India.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I want to give a few words about speaker before session starts. Brigadier Vinod Datta is a warrior and logistician, a former Secretary Defense Crisis Management Group, Disaster Management, MOD. He has overseen the operations in a number of disaster crisis situations at national and international level. Some of the important operations like Kashmir floods, Nepal earthquake, Chennai floods, Puttigal fire, he was instrumental relief and response operations abroad too. He has handled supply chain logistics in Kargil war with excellence. He was also logistics advisor to the Royal Government of Bhutan, and he has been faculty in College of Materials Management, Jagalpur. He conceptualized the first ever Indo-US harder exercise with international observers. He has been part of 9th ADM plus EWG and HADR at Venetia, Lagos in December 2016. Brigadier holds 2 master's degrees in management and strategic studies, LA degree, MPhil in management, and PhD. He has been an alumni of Vector Defense Services Staff College, Wellington Army War College, and IIM in Indore. He has also attended courses on supply chain management and logistics and project management at MDI Gurgaon. He is visiting faculty to Army War College, Defense Services Staff College, Wellington IIT Kanpur, IIT Roorkee, Amity University, Mewar University, Indian Railways Institute of Transport Management, Lucknow IRD, Shimla. Having traversed the logistics in disaster management field and academic world, the natural progression was to share knowledge and inspire self-development. Brigadier is a keen golfer and a voracious reader. His family has singular honor to be in Limca Book of Records for having maximum army officers from one family. Presently, Brigadier is a senior advisor in PNB involved in disaster strategy and recovery. He has deep understanding of business process, stakeholders, and interdependencies. Thank you, sir. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, ma'am, for reading out such a long introduction. I know this is the most critical phase of any webinar, where you see your stomach is full and the mind is, learning for gaining more knowledge. But as a soldier, I accept this challenge, and I will ensure that not only you learn, you also remain awake and you remain happy. And that is my aim. So without much ado, I'll share my presentation. Okay, can you see the slides, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'll be discussing about the risks, vulnerabilities, and the hazards. And I'm sure the other speakers have already spoken on various nuances of disaster. But my approach is going to be slightly different, and it is more echeloned and focused towards the hazard and risk. I'll also, discuss very brief, because it has already been discussed, so I will overlook it and I will, give it a pass. Organization of Disaster Management in India. Disaster Management Act 2005, I will not touch in great detail. Planning and coordination for crisis situation, challenges in HEDR, and everything will be in the backdrop of, risk, vulnerability, and hazards. Now let's see what are the disaster nuances or the challenges or the risks the world is facing. Globally, natural disasters have killed more than 2.5 million people. Economic losses estimated more than 15 times higher as compared to 1950s. Because in 1950s, the form and manifestation of disaster was agriculture sector. And that's why Agriculture Ministry was looking after the disaster management till 2002. The losses from 1994 to 2003 has been $67 billion. 2004 to 2017, $670 billion. It has affected 855 million annually and 97% deaths in developing countries. If you see, the entire disaster risk and profile, we can always say that Asia is the epicenter of. Mukesh, can you just mute your, yeah, thank you. Asia can be comfortably called as the epicenter of disasters. India loses about 4,334 people in a year due to disasters. And economic losses are close to 2% of the GDP, which is more than annual defense budgets. So disasters are developmental losses also. Now, if you see, global population is approximately 9.3 billion, and India adds nearly 2 crore people every year, which means the total population of Australia is about 2.46 crores, which means that we are adding one Australia to our country every year. So you can imagine the risk, the vulnerabilities which we have, and the challenges we have, that if we have to support a country, every year, whatever growth you register, whatever tangible developments you show, they will not be visible. In next 10 years, Earth will be 4 degrees warmer than what it used to be centuries back. And what is now due to Himalayan glacier melting. You know, as per one study, in last 160 years, see, Himalaya holds 44% of the entire glaciers in the world. So the melting has been to the tune of 63 meters in 160 years. Whereas in last 8 years, the melting has been to the tune of 1.6 kilometers. So you see how, the environment is getting warm. Another problem or the risk at which we are sitting is urbanization. Though it is a good thing to be moving towards urbanization, which shows development, but the kind of growth which is taking place is a big question mark. You see, this year, 40% of India is urbanized. When we got independence, it was 16%. 17 out of 20 fastest growing cities in the world between 2019 and 2035 will be Indian cities. And the cities are Surat, Agra, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Nagpur, Tripur, Rajkot, Trichy, Chennai, and Vijayawada. And this is as per the Oxford Economics report. Cities have been made a center of capital appropriation as per David Harvey's report, and the carrying capacity of the land potential is overstretched. So this ginger-like growth which is going on or which has been registered is an area of concern. And India has 14 most populous cities out of 20 in the world. So now you see the kind of vulnerabilities and the hazards which we are exposed to. Now, there are certain paradigm shifts which are going on. Phnom Penh in Cambodia will be the fastest growing city in the world. I mean, when I read this report, I never believed this. And Dar es Salaam in Tanzania will be the leader in growth in Africa. So the focus is now shifted to satellite nations, to smaller nations, which are providing a better environment as far as the business ethics are concerned. Like in India, if you want to start a restaurant, you require 26 licenses from police. Whereas in China, if you want to start a restaurant, you require just 4 clearances. So the ease of business, if you recall in October 2019, India had to do a rollback on corporate taxes because our taxation was the highest, one of the highest in the world. The water crisis in India, as per WHO standards, the minimum requirement for water is 135 liters per day. And it has been in India as 20 liters per day. Shimla, Gurugram, Meerut, Jaipur, Kanpur, Dhanbad, Jamshedpur, Amravati, Mumbai, Sholapur, Asansol, Hyderabad, Vizag, Vijayawada, Bengaluru, Chennai, Coimbatore, Kochi, and Madurai are going to be water critical. And let me tell you, we have already come down to 20 liters per individual. And in war, being a soldier, I'm telling you, the hard scale is 5 liters, where you are not supposed to be shaving, you are not supposed to be having a bath. Indians, on an average, lose 1.5 years of life due to air pollution. That's another vulnerability which we have. And we lose about 1.5 years of life due to air pollution. And Riau in Indonesia, you see, Indonesia is such a small country. And they, with their concerted efforts, would make Riau, a town in Indonesia, totally pollution-free. But in India, it still remains a very big challenge. PM 2.5 comes from power plants, cars, trucks, fires, industrial emissions, and uncontrolled construction. The death rate in children is about to the tune of 51 per 1 lakh. Over 1 lakh children died in 2016 due to ambient and household pollution. Deaths under 5 years of age, we lost about 28,000 boys and about 33,000 girls. And over 2 million deaths occur prematurely in India due to pollution, accounting for 25% of the global deaths. Over 90% of the world children, 1.8 billion, breathe toxic air. So you can imagine the kind of, hazardous environment vulnerabilities we have as far as the potential citizens of the world are concerned. And in 2016, globally, 6 lakh children died from acute lower respiratory ailment due to foul air. As per annual global talks on climate held in Madrid, 700 sites have been identified as low oxygen, and globally there were 45 in 1960. The volume of anoxic water is where the areas which are completely devoid of oxygen have quadrupled. Oxygen source from ocean, we lose about 3 to 4% by 2100. And oceans give you 75% of your oxygen, and the forests 25%. Now, if you see that pollution has impacted so much as far as India is concerned, I'll just give you an example. A smog between November 6 and 14 in the year 2017 was 40% result of the sandstorm which got originated in West Asia, which was carried to India with cool winds. Stubble burning made, say, about 25% particulate matter, and the shrinking of Aravallis allowed those dust particles to land up in the NCR, that is National Capital Region. The kind of illegal mining, illegal construction, and such things happening in the world, in Aravallis, is a cause of concern for NCR region. There are 3 major climatic changes which took place. One was the medieval climate period from 1100 to 1300 AD. Then was a Little Ice Age, 1300 to 1750. And the current warm era, it started from 1750 till date. It has been because of the Industrial Revolution from 1760 to 1850, and the urbanization. Like I told you, even almost half of India is urbanized. You will realize that, everybody is cursing 2020, 2025. Well, folks, let me tell you that this is not the worst year to live in. If you go back in history, 536 AD was the worst year, which saw a fog blanket over Europe, Asia, and West Asia, which might have been the result of the Icelandic eruptions. Snow had fallen in China, causing massive starvation. And the chilliest decade was 2300 years, where there was no recovery till 640 AD. And this has been recorded by Michael McCormick, a medieval historian from Harvard. 1349 AD saw the Black Death hit Europe. And 1918 AD, when the flu killed over 100 million people, as far as the Spanish flu is concerned. The torment of these years continued in 541 AD as the bubonic plague hit the Roman port, and it was one of the reasons for annihilating the Roman Empire or the fall of Roman Empire. Yeah, Firoz, I will take your question slightly later, unless it is very, very pressing. I will take questions at the end of the session. So the torment of these years, the tsunami in Dwarka swept away the entire township. I'm sure you must have seen it. You see, the Conceptualization of Dwarka was done by Lord Krishna. It was constructed by Vishwakarma. The very fact that if that city got totally swept away, that shows that nothing stands in way of natural fury. Why do Indians live dangerously? What are the hazard and vulnerability risks and profile which we have? You will find that, you see, the Indian DNA sometimes is that you give anything to us, we will spike it with so much of adventure and danger that it will make an astronaut balk. We invite risk just as we would invite wedding guests. About 600 people died daily on Indian roads in 2017. In the past 4 years or so, a total of 23,000 people were killed while witnessing that Dussehra. So, you see, if you recall that incident, people who are sitting on the bunks on the railway tracks and seeing Dussehra celebrations. And when the train came, and I'm sure you will appreciate, that train is not a Maruti 800 or a car which will just, zip away. It makes a lot of rattle. What constitutes fire hazard rarely concerns Indian town planners. The most common one of course, is the belief of karma. Because we always take refuge in that yes, you see, it was my karma, or I was destined to be treated like this. The most common one, of course, is the karma which we have already discussed. And then who sets the pace for risk awareness? Ordinary folks or the society? And the square answer is society. Because if the society does not teach the posterity, I'm afraid they will not take the lessons home. People perceive and act upon risks more readily if general system is risk sensitive. Or in India, for example, most people disregard hazards because they are not on the agenda of the administrators or the people who matter. Over the years, we have had many elections, but never has air pollution been an issue. And in 2017, we registered 1.2 million deaths because of the pollution. 846 billion, 60% of the population is exposed to household air pollution. They are third highest cause of death globally. It's the fifth highest. India and China account for 50% of the global deaths as far as pollution is concerned. Indian medical practice is not risk sensitive. We have seen in this pandemic and many such cases. As the doctors to population ratio is very, very, discouraging in India. And we spend just a little over 1% of the GDP. As far as health is concerned, if you study America and various other countries, you will find that 14 to 15% of the GDP is being spent on health services. A modern state is one which recognizes risks people face and preempt them by happening. And to be risk sensitive in an unknown modern world can make one lonely. It is like yelling fire in a theater where people are enjoying a movie. So the guy who warns you will be taken as if he's disturbing. These have been covered. Now the high risk earthquake cities. The risk profile, you see, a better portion of India lies in seismic zone 4 and 5, which is highly sensitive, highly risk echelon. These are some of the cities which are so prone to the earthquake that anything can happen anytime and it is going to be at a mega scale. Srinagar, Shimla, Solan, Panipat, Pithoragarh, Uttarkashi, Nainital, Moradabad, Delhi, Gangtok, Patna, Bhagalpur, Aizawl, Vijayawada, and Ratnagiri are some of the districts which are prone to such things. If you see the terrain peculiarities of India, you will realize that we are a country which is which has got all kind of terrains. If you see from top, you will find that we have glaciated terrains, we have mountain areas, high altitude areas, we have valleys, we have jungles, deserts, plains, riverine. If you see, 55% of India lives in Indo-Gangetic plains. We have Western Ghats. You will realize there was a Kasturi Rangan committee which has given its indications that how the Western Ghats are vulnerable. How some of the villages in Kerala, they just got obliterated from the map of India. We have a coastal line of 7,500 kilometers. We have island territories, which are now posing a great threat in the backdrop of geostrategic or geopolitical scenario as obtained in the world. This is what I was telling you about the Kasturi Rangan committee. You know, villages like Mallapuram and Puthumala in Wayanad, they were totally wiped off. Madhav Gadgil, an ecologist in 2011, and K. Kasturi Rangan, the former ISRO chief, in 2013, they headed this group. The developmental plans were given, but sweet little has been done. If you see the risk profile of India, 59% of India is prone to risk. You see the first slide where you see the red marking. 76% of 7,500 kilometers of the coastline is exposed to tsunami and cyclones. 12% of the country is exposed to floods, 3% to the landslides, and 16% to the drought. This, I'm sure you must have covered. I won't cover this. I'll just touch upon the basic principles of disaster management. It is the primary responsibility of the civil administration. Let me tell you, being from the defense forces, everything is offloaded to the defense. The organization is well placed. The command control is well mandated. Coordination and support is there. Information management has to be utilized to the hilt, and timely activation is to be done. I'll just give you an example of timely activation. You see, there were flash floods in Bhopal. I was in service that time, so the district collector rang me up. He says, "Sir, we want help. There are 7 people who are stuck." So I said, "Please tell me the location." The district collector said, "Sir, somebody will get in touch with you." I said, "Fine." Nobody got in touch with me. We kept on ringing up the civil administration. Nobody picked up the phone. It becomes very difficult, very embarrassing for a person in uniform, that to a senior officer like me, tell somebody that you please launch. It is like, you know, I tell you that I stay in Delhi, and if you ask me where in Delhi, sir, he said, just ask anybody. You know, people will tell you where I stay. So because of this lackadaisical attitude of the state, of the district administration, we lost 2 people. They could not sustain, they got drowned. And 5 people we could rescue. We could have rescued all 7 people if there was a timely action by the district authorities. Now I will tell you that the disaster management is divided into 2 verticals: HADR, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. Humanitarian assistance is what is going on in Afghanistan now. What happened in Yemen, where people are being, you know, airlifted. They are being rescued to the safer places. And disaster relief is wherever the disaster has struck, you provide relief, response, and various other help and succor which is required by that state. I'm sure this must have been covered, so I'm not covering it. I will straight away, because one is time critical. I will just go over I will go over the situational and hazard vulnerability, capacity, and risk analysis. The objective is to list out the steps involved in making disaster management plan. Explain the process of undertaking a situation analysis of the area. It should also explain the process of conducting hazard, vulnerability, capacity, and risk analysis of the area. It should illustrate the tools that can be used for carrying out the hazard, vulnerability, capacity, and risk analysis. The key concepts of HRVCA are situation analysis of a village, town, or a city, hazard analysis, the tools and the techniques which are being used, vulnerability analysis, the tools and the techniques which have been used and templated, capacity, resource analysis, again, the tools and the techniques which have been used, and finally, the risk analysis, what you draw or what has been culled out of all the process. Now, if you see the various steps which include disaster history and format, you should know that what kind of disaster history or vulnerability history or the vulnerability atlas or profile that area has. And what you have to do is you have to list out the disasters like flood, cyclone, household fire, drought, forest, and what have you. Then you have to plot them into various months, that what is the pattern like? Is it climate related? Is it season specific? Once you have done that, the characteristics, the causes of the flood, the warning signs, the speed of the onset or the runoff water, what we call the frequency and the period of occurrence has to be specified. Talk of situational analysis. Sketch of the map is drawn by the participants or the stakeholders. Existing situation of the area is depicted on the map. Situational profile would include information like population, what is the demographic footprint, geographical area, temperature, rainfall, agricultural land, cropping pattern, education, economy, occupation, literacy, income, rivers, road, industries, hospitals, schools, and temples. The sex ratio, families below poverty line, livelihood pattern, drinking water sources, critical establishment of other critical infrastructure. The participants and the stakeholders can be asked to depict the following information on the map of the village or the town or the city. The information which can be depicted on the map can be collated and used as a supplement of assessing the current situation of that area. Areas surrounded by the north, south, east, and western directions. Distance from the nearest villages, towns, and cities. Hills and hillocks, elevated land, inclines, low-lying areas, high tide lines, whatever geological or geographical imperatives you have, they should be templated. And the nearest water bodies and distance from the sea also should be indicated. Number of men, women, children, disabled, elderly, and transgenders and population. Segregated data for aged population. Pregnant mothers, those dependent upon specific medications for their survival can also be mapped. Unfortunately, this psychosocial aspect is often glossed over. Housing, whether you have kacha houses, pakka houses, semi-kacha houses, concrete houses. Natural resources in the area, for example, lands and fields, forests and trees, tanks and ponds, tubes and wells, etc. Different livelihood practices are practiced in the area. For example, agriculture, fishing, seed collection, weaving, wage labor, work, and so on. List of assets of the community, for example, boats, nets, fishing crafts, irrigation facilities for the farmer, implements, industries, MSMEs, and various other industrial areas or EEZs. If they are there, they should be factored in. Existing safe and risk-prone infrastructure in the area and their location, it should be given out in the detailed resource mapping. Now the hazard analysis, how this is to be carried out. It refers to prioritizing disasters based on frequency and analysis of the estimated loss. To review and analyze the occurrence of the past disasters and hazards. Analyze an elderly population, teachers, women, children, focusing on disasters and hazards faced by the community for the past 1 year to past 15 years should be resorted to. Discuss kind and nature of disasters and hazards faced, experience in the hazard faced, warning issued, damage caused, response to the disaster relief and rehabilitation process, traditional methods of coping with community disasters, gaps in management of the hazard, and lessons learned. The vulnerability analysis. The process of vulnerability analysis aims to highlight the weakness in the existing scenario. You should ask the question, who is vulnerable? What is vulnerable? Identify the most vulnerable population. Identify the location of women. They could be pregnant women. They could be lactating mothers. They could be widows. They could be single. Children and old age people. Children physically challenged, mentally challenged, those dependent on life support system and medicines, poor people living in the sea or kacha houses, livestock or cattle or thatched roofs. So all this information then should be planted on this kind of format, in which you will give the level of vulnerability, underlying causes, and the impact. The vulnerability assessment, how it is done. The vulnerability assessment would focus on vulnerable community and vulnerable infrastructure. It assesses the more vulnerable population and the assets in that area. Then you have to carry out vulnerability mapping. Vulnerability mapping can also be used a tool for depicting the area which is vulnerable to the various hazards. And this map can be made separately or clubbed with the hazard map. Capacity / resource analysis. Resource analysis focus on identifying locally available assets and resources that can be utilized for building the capacities of the community during and after disasters. Resource analysis is therefore not limited to the map depicting the available resources, but plotting the distribution, access, and its use by taking into consideration the prevailing sensitivities in that area. The assessment of resources would involve two components. One is the human resource assessment, and second will be the material resource assessment. And all these inputs which you have collected should be plotted in this. The existing capacities to cope with the hazards before or during and after. Gaps, which are the gaps or the voids. Required capacities to cope with hazards. And risk ranking should be there, whether it is high, medium, or low. A resource mapping, the participants or the stakeholders can be asked to locate and depict the various kinds of resources on the map of that area. And the resources could include roads, pakka households, health units, hospitals, trauma centers, field hospitals, religious places, See, some of the religious places, you can use them as, shelters, relief camps. Like gurdwaras and all, they have, eating facilities. They can accommodate a lot of people. They can run community kitchen, water points, schools, clubs. They can be utilized. And other resources highlighted in the following resource matrix. So once you have mapped the resources, you have to plot these resources and like hospitals, total number, contact number and telephone, and distance from the village or the town or the city, public health center, various PHCs, dispensaries, vet hospitals, private hospitals, OPDs, X-ray facilities, because although the trauma centers are supposed to be having all these things, but still you can specify ambulance service. You see 102, 108, 109 ambulance services have been pressed in. Because I'm doing a project for 9 states where the recommendations have been given. Nearest police station. And the problem which we have found on ground is, like, I had gone to witness a mock exercise in one of the states. I won't name the state. To my horror, when I asked them to get all your ambulances, one ambulance was tied with a tree. So I asked them, what is this? He said, sir, the tires are not available. So I asked the SDM, I said, what action have you taken? He said, sir, I have written to the collectorate office. I said, then? He said, no reply has come. I said, why have you tied it? He said, sir, somebody may steal it. So I told him, I said, you are such a senior officer. Even if you look at some people in the market, they will put 2 tires on 1 rim. So at least use it and dedicate it to the community. That is the least you can do as an officer. Then you can give general resources like nearest police station, fire stations, petrol pumps, CNG, cremation sites, power substation, water pumping station, overhead water tanks, and underground water bodies. The search and rescue equipment, cranes, how many cranes you have? Which all places they are located? What had happened in Ranchi, I'll just give you an example. You see, there was, colony, there was, very heavy rains. So the boulders of that hillock got, loosened. So the state authority approached us. So we moved an engineer regiment from Ranchi with a promise that the heavy equipment will be given by the state. Nothing was provided. 24 hours, the disaster management team kept on waiting. Then I told them, please wind up and go back. So we must map these resources. And I'm sure if that land was given to some kind of builder, he must have, built within 15 days, 3 verticals of Ranchi Heights there. But it was not given because it was in the larger interest of the community. The ladders, the chains, heavy hammers, hand saws, all these things should be given. Uttarakhand has made a very comprehensive district disaster management plan. They have even given the name of the drivers, the person who's owning that vehicle. Search and rescue equipment. You can also give open spaces, community centers, schools, playgrounds, stadiums. Skilled human manpower, like doctors, vets, nurses, carpenters, masons, mechanics. All these guys you are going to require. You can give their total number, their telephone number, and these days biggest advantage is the telephone numbers don't change. Gone are the days when you see you are on a mobile roaming or this thing. Now we come to risk analysis. I'll just take 2-3 minutes extra. Risk analysis is a measure of expected losses due to hazard events of a particular magnitude occurring in a given area over a specific time period. The tool is based on determining the risk by analyzing the vulnerabilities and the capacities of the community. Determine the risk by ranking. Ask the participants and the stakeholders about the hazards which poses the highest risk. You must have seen that HML. Explore the reasons due to which the particular hazard poses the risk and consider the vulnerability as well as the capacity analysis. I have finished. If you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask. Even if you have any doubt after this, this is my telephone number and this is my email. You can just drop an email or send a WhatsApp message. I'll be too glad to answer. I know we are time critical. There are other speakers who are waiting, but notwithstanding that, if you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask. Thank you very much, Prasun Roy Chaudhary, for informing that you like the lecture.
Professor Prabhudas sir, your voice is not audible.
Thank you.
Not audible,
is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sir Vinod Datta sir, thank you sir, very informative session sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Dr. K.S. Vignesh. He is working as assistant professor in School of Public Health, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. He did his PhD from University of Madras. His research work focuses on environmental health engineering, public health and emergency management, disaster and management, and JAS. I received a Best Research Thesis Award in 2019 from University of Madras, Government of Tamil Nadu. Dr. Vignesh received a CIEH Level 2 Award in Principles of Risk Assessment and CIEH Level 2 Award in Fire Safety Principles. Dr. Vignesh was a certified professional in various organizations for JAS, Advances and Technology, ISRO, Government of India. GIS Level 2, and also Mountain Disaster Management Landslide. OHSS 18001. He was a lead auditor accredited by Bureau of Veritas, IRCA approved. First aider by St. John Ambulance Services, Indian Red Cross Society, and also certified professional in NABOSH International, Diploma Level 6. Dr. Vignesh has published more than 20 research papers in international peer-reviewed journals. He has authored 7 book chapters in the field of disaster management and environmental studies. He is one of the nodal officers, South Zone, for the development of curriculum on disaster risk reduction in NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. Dr. Vignesh is having a membership of academic professional bodies in Indian Society of Remote Sensing, National Safety Council, Indian Red Cross Society, etc. Dr. Vignesh nominated course coordinator to conduct online course on geospatial technology and remote sensing in Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, ISRO. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Bhatwari. So it's a great opportunity. It's my glad to be the part of this 3-day training program on basic principles of disaster management. So am I audible and my screen is visible, sir?
Yes, sir. You can carry on, sir.
Thank you. It was a very good presentation by Vinod, sir, and sharing his quite good, vast experience, practical experiences. We are grateful to hear from you, sir. It was very nice. And thank you. Special thanks to Professor Bhatwari because for allotting me the second slot. Yes, I will be continuing the presentations which was given by Vinod, sir. Actually, my concept, everything. Sir has discussed the practical part. My part will be on the theoretical part, which is more oriented to the desk-like techniques, more techniques and models and tools. So the topic which I'm going to, I was assigned is the geospatial approaches in disaster management. Yes, this is COVID mandate. Whenever we do being a disaster management professional, whenever we do a webinars, we are asked to put this slide: being safe, stay safe, and wash your hands properly, wear mask, and keep social distancing. Let us go with the topic. So as for 1.5 days, like yesterday and today, you will be hearing about the concepts of disaster management, what is disaster, definition of disaster, and other things. But it's mandatory to know something. Whenever we start a presentation, it's good that if you start with the basics as well. So introduction, as stated by UN Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, disaster can be defined as the occurrence of sudden or major misfortune which disrupts the normal functioning of the society or the community. So now it's based on international organization. Let us have with the Indian organization. As per Disaster Management Act 2005, a disaster is defined as a catastrophic or mishap, calamity, or grave occurrence in any area arising from a natural or man-made cause, either by an accident or by negligence, which results in substantial loss of human and also destruction of property and damage to the environment as well. And beyond the coping capacity, the situation is beyond to the coping capacity, we call it as a disaster. In a layman language, we could say that a disaster is a catastrophic event which causes a widespread damage to the community, to the human, to the damage to environment, and damage to the property. So now, in national terms, the impact of disaster usually results in two major setbacks. So first setbacks might be the direct loss, and the second setbacks might be the indirect loss. If you take any disaster, consider any disaster or any natural hazardous event, if you consider the results which we get will be in terms of two ways. One is a direct loss, and another one is indirect loss. So the major direct loss is the depletion of all national assets. All national assets will be vanished, and indirect loss will be deviation of natural resources. Yes, of course, you can say environmental resources might be degraded, biodiversity or ecosystem or ecological imbalance may occur. So this is more specific to the rural community as well. So now, if you consider the significance of disaster in today's environment, sometimes comes under the question, why do we need to bother much? Yeah, it is. I mean, most of the rural community, because I was very closely working with the rural communities for capacity building program. I used to go for train the trainers as well as the government village officials like village panchayat leaders or village officers or tahsildars. When I do, like, they will ask a simple question that, sir, why do we bother much? We are not much hazardous in nature actually in our village. So why do we want to bother much about these things? So what is the reason behind it? And also they have a feeling that, yes, this disasters has been reoccurring always actually. So it is as a long history, we are facing many disasters. And it's general, it's common and it's general that we should have a stand with the disaster. This is generic idea which the rural community has, but actually there are various factors depends on them, and it makes us difficult to make them understand. But once they understood, they know the seriousness. Okay, these are all the things which is really existing in this global scenario. So when certain factors need to be considered in relation to modern challenges which face disaster management. So when we go to the threats occurring in a different global scenario, if you take traditional disaster threat, new disaster threat, and geography of the disaster. So now traditional threat is, yes, of course, we can say that cyclone, tsunami, flood, it's reoccurring every year. For example, Chennai recently faced 2 days back an earthquake with 5.1 Richter scale at Bay of Bengal, which trembled around Nungampakam, heart of the city, which got trembled. And in Chennai, if you consider as a Tamil Nadu as a case study, most preferably in Chennai, you can take once in 2 years, we will face at least one flood or cyclone every year. Mostly nowadays, every year, I think so. And Kerala, for past 4 years, it is facing a flood, severe rainfall, severe cyclonic effect also. So these are all some traditional threats which occurs globally for each and every country, irrespective of their hazards. Right. So when moving to the new disaster threats nowadays, hijacking, terrorism, civil, and you can say right now, this is the Afghanistan and Taliban is the great example for this new disaster threat. Geography of the disaster, which is also highly important when considering the threat. So based on the geography, it may vary. For example, if you take Tamil Nadu, it is very least vulnerable to civil attacks or war or conflict. Whereas if you take a Jammu and Kashmir, it is mostly highly vulnerable to war and conflict. Whereas if you take Chennai or Tamil Nadu, it will be mostly it may have a chance of flood, cyclone, tsunami, and soil erosion, in sometimes landslide as well. But if you take other northern countries, there might be mostly landslides, no avalanches, as well as earthquakes. So it depends upon the geography as well as the topography, which is very important. This you have seen for past yesterday or today's session about the disaster management cycle. What is the disaster management cycle? Pre-disaster phase, during disaster phase, and post-disaster phase. So here disaster impact is very, 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 very important. Once this impact happens, only you can determine or you can say that this is the pre-disaster phase or that is the post-disaster phase. I think someone is in unmute mode. Kindly request all the participants to put their mic in mute mode. Yes, thank you, thank you. So in case of pre-disaster phase, we can find preparedness, mitigation, and prevention. So there is a serious confusion between the prevention and mitigation. Whenever I talk to the scholars, they will have different ideas about the prevention and mitigation. Prevention is lessening the hazards, whereas mitigation is eliminating the root cause of an hazard. In addition, we can say here is early warning system. Early warning system is like what we hear from the news channel that today's climate is entirely different. So fishermen's communities are not allowed to enter into the sea. So these are all some early warning signals. We get it before the disaster phase. And when you consider the post-disaster phase, of course, that is, during disaster phase, one thing you can do is it's individual responsibility, where you get panic or you react to the situation, or how do you think about your common sense, how you use your common sense, and you do a response activities. That's all you can do during the disaster phase. When considering the post-disaster phase, yes, of course, we can have a recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So these are all the disaster management cycle. And when considering some significant problem in relate to Indian scenarios as well as the international scenario, disaster is a major problem around worldwide and a serious threat which affects the sustainable development. People are talking about attaining a sustainable development goal, but the question mark is whether the mitigation or prevention strategy which we are using to prevent reduce the disaster is sustainable or not. That is a question mark now. Their impacts lead to the loss of life, injuries, and environmental damage. This is one of the great nice point which should be stressed here is India is ranked as a high risk class with a risk management index of 5.7, whereas in terms of flood hazard index, the value is 8.5 comparatively. This is every 2 years, this inform rating will be released based on its disasters occurred over the country, as well as based on the vulnerabilities profile, it will be noted like. So you can see that for the out of 10, India is standing at the 5.7, whereas if you take specifically to flood hazard, it is 8.5. So yes, we have a total coastline of 356,000 kilometers, and the coastal area covers more than 10% of the Earth's surface. And this is about the 356,000 is all about the world's coastline. Over past 2 decades, the number of recorded disasters has doubled approximately from 200 to 400. Yes, that is true. Wherever we face, at least every year, we can say that here and there we are facing few disasters over the country. And if you find out that 9 out of every 10 of these disasters have been climate related, or you can say hydrologically related. This was very clearly explained with the neat diagram by Professor Vinod Datta sir. India has been vulnerable in various degrees. It is highly vulnerable to drought, cyclone, earthquakes, landslide, and avalanches. Out of 32 states and union territories in the country, 27 of them are disaster prone. Almost 58.6% of land mass is prone to earthquakes. Very recently, Chennai has been added. Over 40 million acres are prone to flood, and in India specific, we can say that we have almost 7,516 kilometer coastline. You can say almost 80% of this coastline the people living along the coastal side, like mostly fishermen communities, are very highly vulnerable to cyclone and tsunami. And if you count down the number, it is 5,700 kilometers highly prone to cyclones and tsunamis. So next is 68% of cultivable area is vulnerable to drought. Now, considering what we can do is it's not that there is a theme called to achieve zero harm. That is the only thing we can do. It's not that we can prevent the disaster because it is a naturally occurring. It is not possible to prevent the naturally occurring disaster or natural hazard. So we can do some vulnerability prevention and mitigation measures through either, as Sar rightly said, vulnerability assessment. So what is this vulnerability assessment? Is characteristics and circumstances of a community system or asset that make it susceptible to damage effects of the hazard. So systematically evaluate the damage. So if you see that, for example, you can say if there is a Bay of Bengal around the city, around the country, so the people lying along the coastal side are highly vulnerable to tsunamis and cyclones, whereas the people who live interior, somewhat away from the thing, are not. I don't say this; they are not vulnerable. They are least vulnerable. I could say it's the right word. So types of vulnerability. When I say that it is a physical vulnerability, social vulnerability, and economical vulnerability and environmental vulnerability. So when you consider physical vulnerability, everything like structures, physical structures mostly had a physical vulnerability. And there is a great example. I could say that in general, in the past 50 years back in Turkey, there was a serious earthquake happened. So what happened is they immediately changed all their physical structures into a wooden structure. Immediately fire accident happened. So this is not the right way to give a mitigation measure. So what government of India has now recently introduced a retrofitting structures. So though there is might be a earthquake shake, these retrofitting structures will be able to resist the attack. So that type of things will be introduced as a mitigation measure. Considering a societal effect, yes, drought, famine, and scarcity of food and scarcity of water will come under the societal social vulnerability. Considering the economical vulnerability, if you take any type of disaster, there might be few families affecting from the job, and also few economic instability may happen in general. So of course there will be the loss in now at this COVID situation. There is a huge loss in this economic crisis, and the environmental vulnerability is deforestation, biodiversity conservation, and ecological imbalance and ecosystem damage. Everything will happen due to a disaster. So what we can do, this is very important, that what we can do, why we want to do, many people do that, like why we want to do a vulnerability assessment. What is the reason behind for this to do an assessment? So in general, before Disaster Management Act, I could say in an Indian perspective, before in Disaster Management Act 2005, most of the countries, not only India, most of the countries were taking a reactive measures than the proactive measures. For example, you could say that once the disaster occurs, then they will do analysis and then they will check, okay, these are all the things happened. Okay, fine. Then we can implement some relief funds, etc., and they will finish it off. It's not the right way. But after Disaster Management Act 2005, it was clearly stated that the action should be taken in a proactive way, which is, I could easily say that if you spend $1 in a pre-disaster phase, it may save almost $7 in a post-disaster phase, where most of the countries were lagging in this strategy. So they are very much worried and they are very much concerned about spending money in a pre-disaster phase unless it is getting affected. It is not affected, it is perfect. Why do we want to spend? That is a question where arises from various countries' officials. So after implementing these concepts, yes, of course, it's damn sure, and it is proven that if you spend $1 in a pre-disaster phase, it will take around save $7 in a post-disaster phase. So the three major methods of vulnerability assessment is vulnerability curve method, which is also called as a risk matrix method, and disaster loss data method, as well as modeling method. So if you take a vulnerability risk matrix method, it is universally followed risk matrix method, which SAR has also highlighted few matrices. And the disaster loss data method is constructed in a real-time data collection, which means on the field you should collect the data and do basic analysis. Whereas modeling methods is based on fully depending on a software platform. Let us say it can be a GIS platform, or it can be R platform, Python and MATLAB. Now it is booming. Very recently, it is AI and machine learning is also involving various strategies in. Now coming to this, how we can do with the geospatial approaches. What is this geospatial approaches? So any data that is indicated by or related to its geographical location. If it is related or associated with a particular location, we can call it as a geospatial data. Geospatial data is also known as geodata, which has the postal code, I can say. So we have a doubt that where this data can be collected, where is the data will be available, so that we can do an effective analysis. Can be from GPS locations or geospatial satellite imagery, telematics devices, as well as IoT and geotagging. This IoT is a recently added devices, Internet of Things. And this is basic. Most of them knows that, but I should also give some overview about the types of geospatial data. One is vector data, the other thing is a raster data. So if you consider the vector data, everything will be comes with under the point, line, and polygon. Whereas if you take a consider a raster data, it will come with the with respect to images. For example, if you take an image in your phone, you can zoom it and you can see the pixels, how the pixels is. And these pixels are counted with a digital number, DN number, from 0 to 365. So for a great example, we can see here is, it's just an example to make you understand. So this is the actual image which is shown here. And if you see the vector data, it is in terms of point. Whereas if you see in a raster data, it is in a term of pixels. Let us say if I want to locate your house, if it is a vector data, it will be in a mode of point. Whereas I want to draw a road from my place to your place, it might be in a road of in terms of line. And if it is a water body or agriculture land, it might be in terms of polygon. Whereas if you consider the raster data, for sure it might be in form of pixels only. So this pixels might be calculated based on the digital number. So this is the same example which I want to show. And what is this geospatial technology? This geospatial technology is used to collect, analyze, and store geographical information. Yes, I know what is geographical information. It depends upon the locations, and you use software to map geographical locations. And the GIS use digital software to combine maps and data sets about environmental events. And what this it do? It majorly provides a support to the disaster management, agriculture monitoring, forest fire suppression, and urban planners as well. So when considering this geospatial technologies, it provided data of number of industries, including militaries. Nowadays, DRDO and NDRF is highly playing a vital role in implementing the geospatial technology. And apart from that, recently various urban planners, urban development organizations, and urban development officials are very much eager to implement the geospatial technology in their domain. And the application of this is also very much useful in disaster mitigation and management with various resources available. So there are n number of resources available globally, and also in an Indian perspective, Indian Space Research Organization and Indian Institute for Remote Sensing have a n number of huge data which is available to access and to analyze the data, and you can give some analysis and some results which can be supportive for the decision makers to take decision on disaster aspects. So, which a special reference to urban planning and development and GIS technology for disaster response, how it is very much useful is this data analytics which used in this urban planning and development can easily say that how much energy and transportation has been utilized and because of those urban populations. And if I say, I could say a very good example that in down south of the Tamil Nadu, which is Kanyakumari district, doesn't have a NDRF personnel. So when Oki cyclone was there, we went for a volunteerism, and when we were there, there was no NDRF personnel came into the picture. When we asked the reason behind this, NDRF was not available in that particular district. The headquarters is in Chennai. Maybe they are available in very nearby next neighboring district, Tirunelveli district in Nanganeri. So the time when they reach here, obviously the next next response team should be very proactive. So police personnel and fire personnel are reacted in that point of phase. So and also this response phase can give a clear-cut idea, and there is a serious evidence that when any disasters occurs, we can say that there will be serious interruption of communication as well as the internet. So mobile phones and mobile networks won't work. So there will be most of the cases, it is understandable that the people, NDRF personnel, will rescue the victim. But in some cases, it is not possible to rescue the victim. So once this geospatial technology arrives, people, we would have done, what we have done is in a district, let us say, we would have identified the vulnerable areas, highly vulnerable areas. So obviously this disaster response team will go directly to those vulnerable areas and rescue the victim. This can give accuracy of 90%. Remaining 10%, it's their fate, we couldn't able to rescue them. That is very, very, very important. So there are 4 pillars of disaster management, which is recovery, preparedness, mitigation, and response. In all these aspects, what are all the strategies, geospatial approaches we can use is, when you consider prevention and mitigation, you can have a hazard analysis and vulnerability analysis, as Sir said, risk mapping and resource mapping as well, hazard mapping also can be done. And recovery and rehabilitation, you can plan for recovery and rehabilitation. Let us say that the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, and comes down to the State Disaster Management Authority, and then it comes down to the District Disaster Management Authority. And now recently we have developed for Village Disaster Management Plan also.
The prints are taken people.
Yes, sorry. So when it is in a recovery phase, what we can do is this District Disaster Management Authority headed by the district collector and his official teams like Tahsildar will work on it. The special Tahsildar will be appointed for this District Disaster Management Authority, and personnel will be appointed for continuous monitoring. 24/7 there will be a person which is on basis of rotational shift. So what this District Disaster Management Authority should do in a recovery, rehabilitation, reconstruction, they should identify the emergency shelters in hazardous areas. They should identify the emergency shelters so that this NDRF personnel or fire personnel, whoever the rescue team comes to the place where the victims are available, they pick up the victims and they directly go to the safest haven, which is called as the emergency shelter. This emergency shelter can be planned based on analysis in terms of geospatial technology with in recovery and rehabilitation phases. So these are all a few examples where we can give a where we can use GIS approaches or geospatial approaches in disaster management. Now, many of them have a myth that this GIS or any technology can prevent the disaster. It's not at all possible to prevent a mother nature or a natural hazard occurring, which is natural. But what is the thing we can do is we can predict the areas which can be affected. That's what the point is. The theme of the disaster management is actually to achieve zero harm. It's not to predict or it's not to prevent the disaster. It's not at all possible. To achieve zero harm, we can reduce the impact or we can eliminate the hazard. That's all we can do with. So these geospatial approaches can give a predicting way that this, if landslide occurs, these are all the areas will be affected. If a flood occurs, these are all the areas where the water log will be above 4 feet. So these things we can do with the use of a geospatial approaches. Now this is one example where I can do with like tsunami watch. Whenever there is a satellite image which with the help of Indian Space Research Organizations, they have launched a special satellite image for tsunami monitoring. When the tidal waves increase to the certain height, immediately there will be the notification will release to the IMD. Then immediately IMD people will caution through a media channel stating that the people are not allowed to go, fishermen are not allowed to enter into the sea because of the high tidal waves. So these are all some ideas where, so it's not preventing those tidal waves, it's preventing the loss, it's the reduction of the loss, it is to achieve the zero harm. And this is same what we have discussed earlier, how it is GIS will support for emergency management. Other things is clearly discussed on risk analysis, vulnerability assessment, and mobilization of resources, assessing of damage in all aspects, let's say hospitals, infrastructures, government building, transportation. Everywhere now this geospatial approaches has been implemented. So few models which use critically use geospatial technology in geospatial technology is weighted overlay analysis and multi-criteria analysis and suitability analysis and fuzzy logic analysis. So these are all the 4 major analyses which majorly used in geospatial technology to either you can say vulnerability mapping or you can say assessment mapping. So these 4 analyses is majorly used. So I would like to give some case studies, whichever the work we have performed during in all past days in relate to the disaster management. So first is with respect to the flood hazard, all the works has been published in a very good reputed journal as well. So here is my references. If you want, you can go and have a detailed view. But let me discuss about the brief about few hazards, few projects which we have accomplished in our by our team. So this is first thing is a flood hazard. What we want to do is being from like down to South Kanyakumari district, I would like to study about the flood hazard in my district where I born, so which is Kanyakumari district. So what we planned is actually to study the initial stage we have done. We was very much interested to study about the multi-hazard. But when we go with the in-depth analysis or intensive literature, we found that whatever, whether it can be a tsunami or it can be a cyclone or it can be a heavy rainfall, which leads to the flood situation. So of course, if it is a flood hazard, if we study this flood hazard, of course, it can indirectly address the various problems. So we took the flood hazard as one of the example, and we don't want to restrict into the taluks level. We want to go to the village level as well, but we have got a data for the block level. So we went with the block level. So here you can see the administrative taluks. There are 4 taluks and almost 9 blocks. To the block level, we want to identify which are all the areas will be impacted in case of flood hazard. So the data which we have used is, these are all the data which we are collected from different sources, and all these data are very much important that we have received from various resources in terms of, we can say that these parameters are highly influential to occurrence of the flood hazard. So these flood parameters are considered based on the various analysis, and we have identified 10 parameters which are highly influential to create a flood hazard. So very first thing is geology, and you can see there is a occurrence of gneiss rocks which is highly dominant to flood, and geomorphology, coastal plain is highly concentrated, and soil distribution, which is also very important, that the presence of clay soil, will lead to the stagnation of water, and presence of sand may lead to may have a chance of absorbing the water, and if it is getting saturated, it's not our we cannot control that stagnation of water in a sandy soil. So for that reason, we have studied the other parameters also. We used to call it as a topographic wetness index. And slope, of course, it is down to the south, so it is ranges from 0 to 75 degree, and the lowest area is 0 to 15 degree, and the elevation is almost 0 to 1816 meter. That means like ground from the down south, it is 0 to 364. And you can see here from the top, when there is a heavy rainfall, from the top you can find the delineation of rainwater will come and get stagnated into the lowest area, and they are highly vulnerable, which is also highly vulnerable, and those areas are highly in presence of gneiss rocks, as well as it is called as a coastal plain. So obviously the chance of vulnerability is also high. And the rainfall distribution, the time when we have performed this project, we have done annual rain distribution of rainfall, and we have done how the rainfall is distributed from 0 to 190 centimeter in different areas, in different blocks. And then drainage density, if there is a low drainage density, obviously there is a least chance of developing a stream. So there might be the high range of flood hazard. So that also has been identified. And this is very important thing, topographic wetness index. Why we want to reach this is, for example, you can take a sponge. If you pour a water, it will, at once upon a time, the sponge will get saturated and it will discharge the water. So in that scenario is followed in a sand. So sand will have a tendency to absorb the water, but in certain cases, it may have a tendency to, it might be saturated. So we want to identify the saturated soil where it is presented, which can also lead to, which will be the highest parameters for flood. We have identified those parameters also, and land use land cover, which is very important. And when we see the land use separately, we have studied the land use and land cover for the particular districts with respect to 30 years we have studied. If you see, there is a huge urbanization was happened in down south. So agriculture is highly dominant here. And we have used weighted overlay analysis to perform this. And these are all the high parameters which we have given a weightage. So for the EC calculation, we have given a weightage of about 100% total. And rainfall, let us give, it is very primary factor for flood. So we have given 15%. Whereas if you take a digital elevation model, the elevation we used to give a 10%, which is highly moderately vulnerable. Whereas for geology and other things, we have given 5.5. So it's based on the literatures and based on the influence, how the parameters getting influenced in this area is, we have assigned the weight. And this is the final result which we got, same as that same. So you can see the patches, red patches and the down south are highly vulnerable, whereas the light yellow patches are very highly vulnerable and high vulnerable, and light yellow are moderately vulnerable, and green is low vulnerable, blue is very low vulnerable. The top of the north side is very, very low vulnerable due to the forest occurrence of forest. And the same thing, what we want to do is, being I am contributing to NIDM on curriculum development as well. So initially, what we want to learn is like how the education system is there in the system. Education system with respect to disaster management is there in all the schools. So we want to learn how this education has been adopted in school education, whether in a disaster management. When we see the syllabus of Tamil Nadu, there is very least percentage. Let us say it is less than 3%. I think we have done analysis. It is less than 3% is available in that too in 7th, 8th, and 9th, 10th, and 11th standard. But not at all a single point is available below 7th or 8th standard. So in that scenario, we want the students, or we want to analyze how the children's mentality to study about this disaster management, and also by various factors like government of Ministry of Home Affairs have implemented a national school safety program, and Bihar is highly motivated in that program. Pradhama Mukhya Mantri scheme was also introduced in Bihar on school safety, and so we want to assess the school safety using this geospatial technology. What we have done is, so it's a basic introduction about National School Safety Program has been identified as a creating safe environment for children. So considering the school safety, which are on the safety we will consider is physical safety, emotional and personal safety, and social safety, emergency preparedness, and cyber security. Here we have considered only the section 4, which is emergency preparedness. If you see the schools available in the district is totally we have almost 1,216 schools attributing to the 110% result. But if you see the disaster management syllabus in these schools, it is nil, less than 2%. So what we did is we have categorized all the schools based on government aided, and private schools. So we find a bit difficulties to face all the private schools to collect the data. So what we have done is we have done only analysis only for government and government aided schools. So let us, we have shortlisted 805 schools, which is all government aided, welfare and CBSE schools. And we have through GPS device and geospatial technology, we have located all the schools in the flood map, which we have identified in the last case study. So we can say that almost 34 schools are very, very highly vulnerable, and 691 schools are highly vulnerable. 79 schools are moderately vulnerable, and 1 school is very low vulnerable. You cannot find that school very easily that is very low vulnerable. So now we have identified that almost 805 schools, almost 80% of school is highly vulnerable, and 34 schools are very highly vulnerable. These red spots you can find. So what we want to do is we want to plan them a school disaster emergency plan for the school. So what we decided is, instead of training, of course, we gave a training to them, as well as we have taught them some concepts, and we have asked them. We went to all the 34 schools. We visited the schools, our team, and we have done capacity building training program to the teachers, to the non-teaching staff, to the headmasters, as well as to the students. So students, when we have picked up only 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th students who were very much volunteering about this Scouts and Guides, NSS and NCC activities. So, okay, fine. Now, most of the schools have an intention that if they affected due to flood situation, they don't know where to go. And the headmaster doesn't know each of the school students' houses. So it is not possible. And if the rescue team is on the way, some schools are at the rural areas, down to the rural area. And once it is a flooded situation, the victims cannot be rescued to any hospitals. It is a bit difficult. So what we planned is we want to implement a school emergency disaster management plan for all the 34 schools. Kindly excuse me, please. So how we done is, as a brief, I am saying, so in our district, as earlier suggested, we don't have a NDR of force in our district. Maybe it's in the neighboring district. So we have considered a few emergency services which is highly available in our district. One is health services, which is highly required, fire services, police services, and emergency shelters, and district emergency operations fund. These are all the 5 major services apart from NGOs, because NGOs, which is we couldn't able to collect because of the not authenticated data. So these 5 things we have done. What we have done is considered as the emergency services. So this emergency services, if you see the health services, we have mapped the health services Almost there are 58 hospitals are there in Kanyakumari district, and now there is a serious question that all these hospitals are vulnerable. Whether some hospitals, if you consider 2015 Chennai flood, it is easily understandable that most of the Chennai hospitals are vulnerable to flood. When the victim is taken to the hospital, of course that hospital is also flooded. So in that scenario, we want to identify the flooded, which are all the areas vulnerable hospitals also. So from almost 55 hospitals, 8 hospitals we identified as a highly vulnerable hospital. So we removed those 8 hospitals and we have kept 47 hospitals. It's not the private hospital. It's one and only a government hospital, which is called as a primary health center. And one general hospital has been given here. Apart from that, everything is a primary health center. Because private hospital, we cannot rely upon them authenticity. Authenticity is very less. So we have considered only primary health center. Now, what we have done is, we have located the schools, vulnerable schools. We have located the hospitals. So what we have done is, which is the shortest distance, which is the shortest path, which is the shortest kilometer, where the victim can be taken, victim from the school 1 can be taken to the hospital. Which hospital? For example, I could say that for my mind, hospital A might be very near. And for, let us say, for others, hospital B might be very near. But to be frank, when you analyze the distance, it is easy that hospital C might be very near. So human mentality cannot play during the time of response stage. So we want to give a clear-cut nearest hospital with the perfect kilometer. So you could see that most of the hospitals are almost 4 kilometers, more than 4 kilometers, and some schools are very nearer to the hospitals. Like you can say school number 17 is very closely associated with the hospital number 22 in 1 kilometer. You can see few schools are at a similar way. We have done it for the fire services. So fire services, we cannot, most of the stage, we cannot go to the fire services. Maybe if we are getting escaped, we can go and to the fire service department or fire service areas and we can get rescued. That is different thing. But most of the cases, those fire services will come to our place where the disasters is dominantly presented. So considering that, fire services, we have almost 7 fire services in the district. So these fire personnel should reach the vulnerable area. So where they are, what is the shortest distance for the fire services to reach the school is, for example, school 1 is very nearer to the fire service station 2, which is less than, shortest distance is 3 kilometers. Like that we have analyzed. Apart from that, what we have done is how much minutes it will take them to reach. Now there is a serious question that whether they will come by car or whether they will come by walk. We have generally assumed that a normal normal walking hours 2 kilometers per hour as they are a fire personnel. We have lifting the victim and going out in a flooded logging area. We have considered as a 2 kilometers per hour. So it might be taking 0 to 30 minutes to reach the destination. And this is police services. There is a question that why the police services they work under the 3-dimensional way. You can say that they know the loop and corners and they know the legal aspects also, and they know what is to be done, what is not to be done, and they know. So those people also included in the study. Shortest police stations and how they can reach also, this has been analyzed. And emergency services, this might be the change in each and every year in all the districts. In each and every year, when they are preparing a disaster management plan, now each and every year disaster management plan should be submitted to the state government. State will submit a state disaster management plan to disaster central. So nowadays village disaster management plan has been emerging. When we are considering this, we have 12 emergency shelters. All these shelters, if I say emergency shelter, more than me, sir, Vinod sir might have known many things about this. As per my understanding, 72 hours of facilities should be there. If a victim is rescued over to the emergency shelter, his basic amenities, basic needs should be satisfied for next 72 hours. Why this emergency shelter is very important is it's not, doctors cannot go to each and every houses or each and every affected places to treat the patient. Whereas he or she will go directly to the emergency shelter, do the treatment and come up. So these very, very important. And district emergency operation center, Of course, I have told many times DEOC, which is headed by the district collector. The collector office is usually come as a district. So we have done how they can reach to the district emergency operations center and what is the shortest distance. And now at all time, what we have done is we have merged all the emergency services, and we have decided that for the school 1, which emergency services is very easily accessible. For example, for school 1, fire services is accessible. For school 2, emergency shelter is accessible. So these are also comparing all the 4 emergency services, which is very much accessible, also has been studied. This is the general study which we relate, and we have prepared a disaster management plan to all the 34 schools, and we have displayed it in their, in the board also. And the contact numbers, everything has been also prepared. This is one of the study. And the other study we had with landslide hazardous, the Nilgiris district want to learn about the landslide areas. They know this is the spot, black spot, which they have is landslide. They know that these are all the areas landslide have occurred. So with the help of the Geological Survey of India landslide inventory, they got this data. But now they want to do the landslide susceptibility mapping. What we have done is we have used different various parameters as such like flood, and we used the AHP method for weighted overlay analysis based on the intensive literature and its influence. We have assumed the weightage, whereas for AHP process itself will find the weightage of the parameters, which is a different topic which I can share it, or you can see my YouTube video as well. And these are all the few parameters which we have considered for landslide susceptibility mapping. And you can say aspect, slope, elevation, and land use, land cover, and geology, distance, drainage distance for fault, rainfall. And final map is here, which are all the areas are highly vulnerable to landslide. Is very low areas are at the top, and very high areas you can see major patches are at the very high. And very low areas are 22%, and low areas are 20%, medium is 15%, and high area is 27%, and very high is 13%. So this is the generic land susceptibility mapping, which is also published. We didn't leave with this, we have done only for disasters. No, we have also performed some analysis based on the environmental aspects also on air pollution. So air pollution during the COVID situation, we just want to know that how this air pollution has been reduced or increased when comparing to 2019 as well as 2020. Because comparing to 2019, March, April, May, June, July, August, and this 2020, there was a serious lockdown in over the country. So whether the air pollution is increased or reduced, if you ask a normal person, they will say that yes, of course it is reduced. Yes, of course it is reduced, but not that to the greater extent. It is very much leastly reduced because of various, as Sir said, rightly said, stubble burning and other things happened, and also cremation, everything happened. So because of those reasons, we want to identify how these parameters differ. So what we have done is we have taken 4 parameters: nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and ozone. All these 4 parameters are compared with the time period of March to August in the year 2019 and 2020. So it's all based upon the logically geospatial approach only. If you see here, there is a lockdown. This map is noting down the lockdown, where the lockdown was there in the month of March till August. How the lockdown, when the unlock was happened. This is the map. And if you see nitrogen dioxide, you can see one and only nitrogen dioxide alone has been reduced because of the reduction of vehicular emissions. Let us say the car, buses, trains, flights has been stopped. So because of those reasons alone, nitrogen dioxide shows a nominal decrease in the year 2020. But considering the sulfur dioxide, it is less than 10% reduction. Considering CO, never, it is less than 5% reduction only. Whereas if it is ozone, considering the ozone, there is more, it is not at all, it is increased. Ozone has been increased. So we have reported various reasons because of that. You can find it in my paper as well. And immediately with the COVID-19 during the month of March, we got the opportunity to map the hotspot of the area, which is COVID-19. So what we have done is, we want to map the hotspot which area is highly vulnerable to COVID. So what we have done is we want to consider the air travel, seaport travel, as well as the national highways. So we have taken entire Tamil Nadu with all national highways, as well as seaport, as well as airport. So and I very much stress upon one point here. This is very recently after the COVID, March month which it was done. It's not June or July because the cases was huge. So when we see this, only there are almost less than 15 test centers was available in Tamil Nadu. And if you consider the COVID-19 cases, you can the cases varies from various regions in the various districts you can find. And here you can see that we have also done a quarantine follow-up also. The quarantine has been 20,000. We have followed up with all the districts. And at last, we want to know the population density. So to identify the test center's capacity, whether how much people it can hold for this village or hold for this district. So each test center, we have analyzed that how much it can cover. So this also we have done. And at last, we have identified the COVID vulnerable zone. The areas which is a dark red is highly vulnerable, and very highly vulnerable, moderately vulnerable also we have done. We have also identified the hotspot analysis, which is the most hotspot for the COVID-19 spread also we have submitted. And very lastly, we also want to learn, and also the client also want to learn about the travelers whom they have traveled from different countries have created a spread. Or they travelers, because initial stage it was because of the travelers only. So those things also we have studied. You can say from international travels, the case ratio is 23, which is 75% is because of the international travel, and national travel is 88% right from Delhi, Bangalore, and Chennai. This is the overall percentage. So nothing is impossible using geospatial technologies, but nowadays R programming, Python, and AI and machine learning is also an added advantages for analyzing the disaster management or disaster aspects also. So many things can be possible using geospatial approaches. So various advantages are also there. So are spatial in nature as they strike as a specific location and influence a particular area. So in advanced countries of world, GIS has been successfully utilized in address all the phases of disaster management. This was already discussed, the advantages, what is the major advantage of disaster management. And we can say roadmap, identification of shape, locations, macro and micro level maps, etc. That everything is possible, including hospital identification, as a said, suitable analysis, hazard mapping, as a resource mapping. And I would like to present a very small video. Please, Professor Bhatwari sir, please confirm whether the audio is able to hear.
Yes. Yeah. You can play. Yes, audible.
Thank you.
At ITC, the Faculty of Geoinformation, Science and Earth Observation of the University of Twente, we work together with governments, NGOs and private organisations to enable countries to deal with mankind's complex challenges. But what does this mean? With state-of-the-art technologies, we collect, analyse and use complex spatial data to help countries in dealing with national and global challenges. One of these challenges is disasters like earthquakes, floods, landslides and fires. We use Earth observation sensors to obtain spatial data of the Earth's surface. From this, we generate 3D landscape and city models that support applications like flood management, landslide monitoring, and deforestation and forest fire recovery. We use drones to remotely reconstruct reality in 3D after a disaster. For example, after an earthquake, we remotely assess damage and potential dangers without physically entering dangerous or inaccessible areas. This helps experts to make important decisions for further actions and keeps first responders and officials out of harm's way. From image-based point clouds, we reconstruct complete 3D building models for emergency applications. This means that in case of a fire, gas leak, hostage situation or other hazards, emergency responses can act with the knowledge of real-time on-site information. Via education and by transferring and exchanging our knowledge, We provide countries with the ability and capacity to take on these complex challenges in an optimum manner and make planet Earth a better and safer place for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. If any questions, I am very much ready to answer for your questions. Kindly. Any questions from the participants, please?
Participants, do you have any questions you can ask, sir? He is ready to answer you.
Sir,
Yes,
good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
So, is there any short-term courses or any diploma courses in which we can study further about the geospatial technologies in disaster management?
Yeah, actually, whether you are a university student or I mean, you are graduated or working in somewhere, may I know that, please, if you wish to say?
I completed my post-graduation in geography.
Okay, that's great. So now what we have is with the collaboration of Indian Institute for Remote Sensing, what we have done is from the month of August to November, we will conduct the basics of geospatial technology, and we will conduct the basics of GPS and GNSS. For these 3 months, evening 4 to 6, online only. We will conduct those courses. After studying that, after clearing, it's based on 3 modules. If you clear these 3 modules, after that you will be taken into the geospatial approach in disaster management. Because to study about the geospatial approach of disaster management, as a prerequisite, you need to study this. So after finishing this, you will be taken into a geospatial approach in disaster management. So there is a course with the collaboration with Indian Indian Institute for Remote Sensing. That is possible. Apart from that, people who want to know everything about they want to very much interested about disaster management, we are framing the syllabus for postgraduate diploma in disaster management with the help of NIDM. So that is also under progress. So there is a chance.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions, sir?
Any questions?
And this is my mail ID and this is my contact number. And I have some few additional responsibilities also. And I would like to willing to collaborate with all the teammates, whoever are willing to collaborate with me on disaster mitigation strategy using GIS and remote sensing, air quality monitoring, occupational health assessment. And here is my contact number and mail ID. You can write it to me. And if it is more urgent, you can call to me also. No problem. I'm ready to answer.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Very good evening.
First, I have to tell the project we have done for the Kanyakumari district about the flood hazard mapping, including the various factors such as schools. That is a very good, sir. May I know to whom you presented the data, sir? The project?
We have presented the data into the government officials, but still after the political arena changes, it has to be presented again. Let us see, hope for the changes. We have also seek the fund for should be implemented for all the districts also. But
yes,
it was done with the old government, but now as of now, new government has started. And we are seeking the appointment, but right now people are very much busy with the COVID related activities, so we couldn't able to catch up them. But they told that they will consider the same. We have submitted to the government as well.
Yes, sir. That is the district disaster team will.
We will also presented the same to the district collector in the year 2019. 19 we have presented to the district collector, and the entire report is there in the district collector office library also. Yes, but after we also want to insist the collector that we want to do same analysis for all the 699 vulnerable schools.
Yes, sir.
But we have considered only very high vulnerable schools. Apart from that, we didn't consider highly vulnerable schools. So we were insisting, but as you know that the situation of Tamil Nadu is different it won't go with us. So let us hope for the best, I think so. As of now, we have planned that rather than moving in depth into the Kanyakumari district, we can address the different districts problem with relate to school. That's what we have proposed to the government. Let us wait for the good outreach.
Yes, sir. Very thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
But sir, in chat box, some questions are there.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Vignesh, sir.
Yes, sir. I am. Please.
Wonderful presentations. I have one question.
Please, sir.
Because you find out any water analysis in the Kanyakumari flood hazard mapping?
Water analysis.
Quality or
no, sir. Water quality. I am recently studying about the water quality parameters, sir. I didn't do any water quality analysis on this thing, but one of my friends have done a groundwater quality analysis where they identified most of the elements. Fluoride content has been identified also, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Participants, do you have any other questions? Sir, your mail ID is correct. One person is asking questions about your mail ID.
Yes, sir. Vignesh k1@srmist.edu.in.
Okay.
And personal mail ID is ksvigneshsph@gmail.com. Correct only, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Any more questions? And one question was there for the presentation. I mean, could I please know what software you had used for flood vulnerability mapping? Right now, it is the booming software is, let us say, AI and machine learning. We are exploring that, but what we have used is ArcMap 10.3, where we have a licensed remote sensing lab we have. So based on that only we have performed.
Sir, participants are seeking your PPT, sir.
Yeah, sure. I will share it to you, sir, so that you can share it to them.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Any more, sir?
I think there is no question, sir.
Okay. So at the outset, I would like to thank Satyabama University, the Vice Chancellor and Director Research. And I'm sincere heartfelt gratitude to Professor Bhatwari, sir, for giving me this great opportunity for presenting this in a common forum with the collaboration of NIDM. And it was greatly delivered, I think so, sir. I have hopefully done my job actually. So thank you very much for the great opportunity. And also I would like to thank all the participants who has been maintained their patience throughout my session. Thank you very much. I extend my also heartfelt thanks to Professor Vinod, sir, who has given a practical aspects of all about the disaster management as well. So thank you one and all for the great opportunity, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to deliver the special lecture here on your busy schedule. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir. So can I leave if you don't mind?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can leave, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all. Stay safe. Thank you.
Participants, kindly fill the feedback form before leaving the meeting. Balaji, sir. Balaji, sir. Okay. Okay. All are requested to fill the feedback form before leaving the meeting. Okay.